I was halfway across the bridge when my phone rang, the late evening traffic humming all around me, headlights streaking across the wet Seattle pavement. Grandma June's name flashed on the screen, and for a split second I thought she was just calling to check in about my week the way she always did. I pressed the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. Her voice trembled soft but weighted. "How are you feeling, sweetheart? Any better after the wedding?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel so fast the leather creaked under my palms. "The wedding?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Grandma, what wedding?" Silence. Just the sound of her breath shifting across the line. And then the words that split me wide open. "Your sister Victoria, she got married last weekend. A big ceremony. Everyone was there. Your parents told me you weren't invited because they said you'd cause drama." The bridge blurred. For a moment I couldn't hear the horns behind me, couldn't feel the motion of the car beneath me. All I heard was that one sentence pounding in my skull. They said I'd cause drama. My throat burned as if something sharp had lodged inside. "Grandma," I whispered, but the word fractured in my mouth. I didn't even know. She exhaled a sound like defeat and murmured that she thought I deserved the truth. When the call ended, I just sat there in the driver's seat, the world outside continuing like nothing had changed, but mine split down the middle. I pulled onto the shoulder, heart racing too fast to keep driving. Cars whizzed by, tires spitting water, but all I could see were those images I hadn't even witnessed yet. Victoria in her lace gown, my parents' beaming champagne glasses lifted high, and me erased. Not forgotten. Not overlooked, deliberately erased. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles blanched. My parents had always found ways to make me smaller, but this was final proof. They hadn't just shut me out of a dinner or a conversation. They had carved me out of a memory that would live forever. When I finally got the car moving again, my eyes stung so badly I had to blink through the blur of tears and taillights. By the time I reached my apartment, the city lights seemed colder than ever. I didn't even bother turning on the lamp. I tossed my keys onto the counter and sank onto the couch, my phone still heavy in my hand. Instagram glowed against the darkness. My finger hovered shaking, but I tapped anyway. The first image stopped me like a slap. Victoria, under a crystal chandelier, veil spilling down her back, my father at her side, chest puffed with pride, my mother clutching her hands to her lips, tears glistening as though this were the pinnacle of her life. The caption read, "Perfect family." I bit down so hard on the inside of my cheek that I tasted blood. Perfect family. Where was I in that perfection? I scrolled again. Table after table draped in silk, relatives smiling for the camera, cousins I hadn't seen in years, neighbors from Bellevue who used to wave at me on my way to school. Every face familiar, every face except mine. It wasn't just about the wedding. That much was clear as the salt of my own tears stung my lips. This was confirmation of what I'd known for years. Deep down in the pit of my stomach, in the Addams family, I was disposable. Memories I'd buried rose like ghosts in the dark. I saw myself at 9 years old, standing beside my father at the county fair. Victoria had begged to enter a pageant, and he'd driven her 2 towns over, cheering her name so loudly other parents turned to look. She won 2nd place, and he hoisted her up onto his shoulders, proclaiming she was destined for greatness. I had been holding a spelling bee ribbon that very morning. 1st place. No one had asked. No one had cheered. By the time I was in high school, I'd grown used to disappearing. Victoria floated down hallways in cheer uniforms, laughter trailing her like perfume, while I spent nights in the library chasing grades like oxygen. When my acceptance letter to Northwestern arrived with a full scholarship, I had sprinted home, heart bursting, only to hear my father mutter, "Good for you," before burying himself back in the sports section. My mother had smiled absently, asking if I'd be home weekends to drive Victoria to practice. The sting of that never left. Neither did the Thanksgiving when I stood up to announce a promotion at work, only for my father to cut me off and praise Victoria for landing a new client at her PR firm. The applause that followed had crushed me more than silence ever could. Now, years later, sitting alone in my Seattle apartment, staring at the glow of Victoria's perfect family photos, I felt that same applause ringing in my ears. But this time, it wasn't sadness filling me. It was something harder, hotter. They had branded me the troublemaker. Said I'd ruin the day. Said I didn't belong. My lips twisted into a bitter smile even as my eyes burned. If that was the role they wanted me to play, maybe I'd play it, but not in the way they expected. I pushed my phone away and pressed my forehead into my hands. My father's words echoed from the depths of my memory. Words he'd repeated at every chance. You'll never have a happy marriage. No one would put up with you. I let the sting linger for one last breath, then lifted my gaze to the dark window, where my reflection stared back at me. The diamond ring on my left hand caught a stray glint of streetlight. The ring no one in my family had even noticed, the secret they never cared to ask about. A laugh, low and sharp, slipped past my lips. They had written me out of their story. Fine, but mine wasn't over. If they thought I'd spend my life erased, they had no idea who I really was. My father's voice echoed again in my skull. You'll never have a happy marriage. But I whispered into the silence of my apartment. A vow to myself. Watch me. The morning light in Seattle filtered pale through my blinds, turning the walls of my apartment a washed-out gray. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee cooling in my hands, but my stomach was too tight to swallow even a sip. My phone was face down on the counter, yet I could feel its weight pulling at me, daring me to check again to see the endless photos of a wedding I had never been invited to. I told myself to breathe, to move on, but the truth burned too hot. My sister had walked down an aisle in lace and chandeliers, while I was sitting here invisible. My parents had cheered, toasted, smiled for photographs that would live forever, while I was branded a troublemaker, erased from the story. By late afternoon, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I grabbed my keys, shoved my arms into a coat, and drove. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as the skyline blurred past. I didn't even need to think about where I was going. My car knew the way. 15 minutes later, I was pulling into the long circular drive of my parents' Bellevue home. The house looked as polished as ever, trimmed hedges, and white shutters gleaming like it had been staged for a magazine shoot. Flower pots flanked the porch, and the brass knocker shone like gold in the winter light. It looked warm, inviting, even though inside it had never felt like home to me. The door opened after the second ring. My mother Helen stood there in a cream blouse and slacks, a dish towel draped over her shoulder. Her smile was strained, the kind she used at church, when she wanted people to believe everything was fine. Rachel, she said softly, almost surprised. What are you doing here? I stepped inside, without answering, the familiar scent of garlic and onions wafting from the kitchen. My chest was tight, but my voice came out steady. Why didn't anyone tell me Victoria was getting married? The towel twisted in her hands. Her lips parted, closed, then opened again. Sweetheart, we thought you wouldn't want to be in such a big crowd. You never liked those kinds of events. A sharp laugh escaped me, echoing down the hallway. You decided for me. You erased me, because it was easier than letting me exist in your perfect little picture. Heavy footsteps sounded on the hard wood, and my father appeared from the living room. Charles Adams' glasses perched low on his nose, expression already hard as steel. What's going on? Why are you raising your voice in my house? I turned to him, my breath shaking but my words fierce. Tell me why I wasn't invited. His jaw clenched. He glanced at my mother, then back at me, eyes like blades. You want the truth, because you would have ruined it. Victoria deserved her day without you making a scene. We had to protect her and protect our reputation. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I blinked, stunned, even though a part of me had always known. You think I would have ruined it? All I wanted was to be there. I'm her sister. His lips pressed into a thin, dismissive line. At the club, at church, everyone knows how difficult you are. We couldn't risk it. I staggered back, a step breath coming shallow, but before I could speak again, a voice floated cool and casual from the staircase. Honestly, it was a relief not having you there. Victoria descended slowly, her hair swept back in a sleek bun, a silk cardigan draped over her shoulders like a crown. She looked me up and down with a smirk that dripped satisfaction. You would have made it awkward. Everyone knows you don't fit in with that world. The words sliced cleaner than any knife. My chest tightened as I stared at her. This girl I once built blanket forts with whispered secrets to under our shared quilt. Now she looked at me like I was a stranger begging for scraps. You cut me out, I whispered, my throat raw. You made sure I wasn't even an afterthought. Her smile curved cruelly. It was better that way. The silence that followed pressed heavy. My mother wrung the towel in her hands, her gaze darting between us like she wanted to stop the bleeding but didn't know how. My father's expression didn't soften once. Then, as if to twist the knife deeper, he chuckled under his breath, shaking his head as though I were a child throwing a tantrum. Be serious, Rachel. You'll never get married. You don't have it in you. The words struck with the force of a punch. For years I had swallowed their slights, convinced myself that if I achieved more, worked harder, they might see me. But here it was laid bare, their judgment final and merciless. Something inside me stilled. The trembling in my hands quieted, my back straightened, and my voice came out calm, steadier than I felt. Then don't expect an invitation to mine. The room froze. My mother's mouth fell open, her eyes wide with shock. My father's smirk faltered, though he tried to mask it with disdain. Victoria blinked, her smugness cracking for a flicker before hardening again. I didn't wait for their response. I turned, shoes loud against the polished floorboards, and pulled open the door. My mother called my name soft, almost pleading, but I didn't stop. The evening air hit my face, cool and clean compared to the poison inside. I walked down the porch steps, my chest heaving. Behind me, faint laughter floated from the house, sharp and cruel as ever. Sliding into my car, I gripped the wheel and stared at the glowing windows of the home I had never belonged to. The porch light shone like a beacon for everyone but me. I started the engine, my reflection pale in the rearview mirror, but my eyes were different now. Harder, clearer. For the first time in years, I saw resolve staring back at me. The drive back into the city blurred with streetlights, my heart pounding in rhythm with the tires on the asphalt. Their words still echoed, "You'll never get married. You don't belong. You're a troublemaker." But beneath the sting, something fierce unfurled in my chest. I glanced down at the diamond ring glinting faintly on my finger, the one secret they'd never cared enough to notice. A smile tugged bitter and triumphant at my lips. They'll see, I whispered into the night. They'll see how wrong they were. Back in my apartment, the silence pressed against me like another set of walls. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank into the sofa, the ring on my left hand, catching the faint glow from the streetlight outside. I twisted it slowly, feeling the weight of the diamond, the promise it held. They hadn't even noticed. All those dinners, holidays, awkward afternoons when my mother asked if I was seeing anyone, and I'd said little. The truth was there on my hand, glinting in plain sight, and they'd never cared enough to look. I leaned my head back against the cushions, my chest aching. For years I'd kept Ethan a quiet secret from them. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew how it would play out. Mockery, comparisons. Some cutting remark to remind me I'd never be Victoria. But now, sitting here in the dark, I realized I was done hiding. I closed my eyes, and the memory of the first time I met Ethan drifted back like a bomb. Sophomore year at Northwestern. The lecture hall was packed with 200 students, the professor droning through supply and demand slides. My pen scratched furiously, desperate to keep up, when a folded slip of paper landed on my notebook. Startled, I opened it. A neatly drawn graph stared back at me, the lines cleaner than the ones on the projector. At the bottom, a note, "Looks like you're working harder than the professor." I turned, and there he was, a tall guy with sandy hair and sharp green eyes, grinning at me like we'd already shared a joke. That was Ethan. After that, he seemed to appear everywhere: study groups in the library, late-night coffee runs, marathon cram sessions before finals. He wasn't like the other finance majors who swaggered on their fathers' names. He respected the grind. He respected me. When I told him about the scholarship that got me here, he didn't brush it off. When my parents forgot to call after I won an award, he showed up at my dorm with takeout Chinese and a smile that never made me feel small. Years later, when he asked me to marry him, it hadn't been in some grand display. We were sitting in his sleek condo in downtown Seattle, a bottle of wine half empty between us. He reached across the couch, slipped the ring onto my finger, and said, "Rachel, I don't care what the world thinks. I just know I don't want another day without you." The tears had come fast, not from sadness but relief. For once someone saw me not as the family troublemaker, not as the shadow of Victoria, but as someone worth choosing. The sound of a key in the lock pulled me from the memory. The door opened and Ethan stepped in, loosening his tie, his jacket slung over one shoulder. His eyes found mine immediately. In 2 strides he was beside me, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Rough day?" he asked softly. I let out a laugh that cracked at the edges. "That's one way to put it." He sat beside me, arm curling around my shoulders, grounding me. "Tell me." The words spilled out faster than I thought possible. Grandma's trembling call, the photos online, my parents' cold faces, my father's cruel declaration that I would never have a happy marriage. Each sentence felt like glass leaving my throat. By the time I finished, the room was thick with silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just held my hand, thumb tracing circles against my skin, letting me unravel without judgment. Finally he spoke, voice steady. "They don't get to define you. They never did." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't fight them. I leaned against him, soaking in the warmth of someone who didn't see me as a burden. "To them, I'm nothing," I whispered. His jaw tightened. He lifted my left hand, the diamond catching the dim light. "Then we don't need them. When the time comes, when we stand in front of the people who love us, we'll choose who deserves to be there." I stared at the ring, the promise it carried. For months, I'd clung to scraps of hope that my family might finally see me. But here, Ethan was offering me something different: freedom. I squeezed his hand, a flicker of strength sparking in my chest. He smiled, that steady smile that had carried me through every storm, and kissed the top of my head. The rest of the night passed in a quiet that didn't feel heavy. We ordered dinner but forgot to eat it. We sat with the television murmuring in the background, his arm around me, my breath finally slowing. The chaos of my family buzzed faintly in my mind, but it no longer felt like the center of my world. Later, when we lay down in bed, his words replayed in my head. "We will choose." For the first time, the idea of a wedding didn't feel like a dream I'd never reach. It felt like a vow waiting to be fulfilled, a day where I would stand tall and decide who had earned the right to witness it. And I knew without doubt some faces would not be there. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my desk at work, catching on the rim of my coffee mug and the edges of spreadsheets scattered before me. My team huddled around the conference table, tense. A client worth millions was threatening to pull out unless we stabilized their portfolio before the market closed. I stood at the head of the table, my voice steady as I walked them through a new strategy: shift resources, here hedge exposure, there. Call the client directly to reassure them we were already executing. For 2 hours I commanded the room, recalculating, directing, steadying the panic. And when the market closed, we had turned the tide. The CEO, Michael Grant, intercepted me in the hallway as I left the boardroom. Tall, stern, rarely one to praise, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "That was textbook leadership, Rachel. You saved us all a headache. Keep this up and I see a very clear future for you here." His words lit something inside me that had long been starved: recognition freely given. I thanked him, forced my voice level, but inside a small flame of pride burned. Yet even in that victory, I thought of family dinners back in Bellevue. Every Sunday I'd try to share pieces of my work only to be cut off by my father with a dismissive, "Enough about spreadsheets, let Victoria tell us about her gala." My mother beaming, my sister smirking, my words shrinking to silence. Not anymore. That evening, as I walked out of the office into the crisp Seattle air, I reached for my phone. The diamond glinted again, a quiet reminder. My parents might have laughed, my father might have told me I'd never marry, but the truth was already on my finger. They had no idea what was coming. I paused on the sidewalk, the city buzzing around me, and whispered into the twilight. We'll see who has the last word. The office still smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink when I walked in the next morning, clutching my laptop bag tighter than usual. Conversations hushed as I passed, not out of disrespect, but because whispers about Victoria's glamorous wedding had already reached my coworkers. I could hear them. Did you see the photos? That ballroom was insane. I lowered my gaze, forcing myself into my corner office before the bile in my throat rose any higher. By 10, I was leading another crisis, meeting a team of analysts looking to me for direction. Their eyes flicked between screens and my face, and for a moment I felt that old ache, how easily I could command respect in a boardroom, yet never at my parents' dinner table. I drew lines across the chart, outlined risks, gave instructions. Confidence flooded my voice, though I was hollow inside. By the time we wrapped, Michael, the CEO, passed by, tapping my shoulder. Excellent composure, Rachel. We'd have been sunk without you. His words warmed me for a second, but then another voice intruded in my head. My father's cold and final, you'll never have a happy marriage. I stayed late, staring at the cityscape through floor to ceiling glass. That's when I saw it, a notification blinking on my phone. A Facebook post from my mother. The caption dripping with sanctimony, "It breaks a parent's heart when a child chooses distance. But sometimes for the greater good of the family, we must let go." My chest tightened as I scrolled. Dozens of comments lined up beneath, women from church offering prayers, neighbors clucking sympathy. Some even added their own knives. She always seemed difficult, poor Victoria. She deserves peace. My fingers shook over the screen. They weren't just erasing me privately, they were painting me as the villain in broad daylight. My throat burned with humiliation, then rage. That evening I found myself in Ethan's condo downtown, the skyline glittering behind him as he poured 2 glasses of wine. I shoved the phone across the counter to him. He scanned the post, his jaw locking, green eyes darkening. "They want to make you the scapegoat," he said. "But you don't have to fight their way. What am I supposed to do?" My voice cracked. "Stay silent while they crucify me." He set down the glass and pulled me close. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling louder. It's living so well they choke on their own lies. His calm steadied me, but inside I still trembled. For once, though, I believed him. 2 nights later he drove me to Palo Alto to meet his father. The Cole estate was more museum than home, arched stone, sprawling lawns, a fountain at the entrance sparkling under moonlight. Inside, William Cole shook my hand firmly, eyes as sharp as his son's but older measured. We sat in a study lined with leather-bound books. "I'll be direct," he said, folding his hands. "Ethan tells me your family is complicated." I laughed bitterly. "That's one way to put it." His gaze held mine steady, unflinching. "So tell me, Rachel, do you want them at your wedding?" The question caught me off guard. My breath stuck in my chest. For a moment I saw my father's smirk, heard him declare, "I'd never marry." I saw my mother twisting truth into performance, my sister smirking as she posed in silk. "No," I said finally, my voice firm even as my hands shook in my lap. "They don't deserve that seat." William leaned back, a slow smile forming. "Good. Because when the time comes, I want you to walk down that aisle, knowing you chose who stood by you, and you'll have the full support of this family to make it happen." Something uncurled in my chest, fragile but real. A sense of being anchored, chosen not out of obligation, but out of respect. Back in Seattle days later, I sat at my own kitchen table, envelopes spread before me. Names I loved flowed easily from my pen: Grandma June, Aunt Margaret, the cousins who had slipped me secret notes of encouragement at holiday dinners. But when I reached for the names of my parents, my hand froze. The pen hovered, then stilled. Slowly, I set it down. The space on the envelope remained blank. As I stared at the empty spot where their names could have been, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. "You can play dress up all you want. No one will care about your little wedding." My fingers shook, but a laugh bubbled out, sharp and unsteady. I snapped the phone shut, sliding the envelope away. My heart pounded, but the tremor in my hands felt less like fear and more like fire. Standing by the window, the lights of the city blinking against the dark, I whispered into the glass to the ghost of his voice in my head. "You'll see." The diamond on my finger flashed once in the reflection, bright and defiant. Morning light streamed through the blinds of Ethan's condo, catching on the ivory envelopes spread across the dining table. I sat there in my robe, pen in hand, my stomach tight as I wrote the names of the people who truly mattered: Grandma June, Aunt Margaret, my cousins Emily and Grace, a few friends from work who had stood by me through every storm. The ink flowed smooth golden across thick paper, but when I reached for the envelopes meant for my parents and Victoria, my hand froze. The silence pressed in heavy. I set the pen down and let the space stay empty. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. The door opened behind me, Ethan returning with 2 coffees from the shop downstairs. He set one by my elbow, kissed the top of my head, and glanced at the envelopes. That's it, I said, voice firmer than I expected. He smiled, not pitying, not questioning, just steady. Good. Then we can focus on the ones who will actually celebrate with us. By noon, we were in Napa Valley. Ethan had insisted I see the mansion his father had offered for our wedding, a sprawling estate, surrounded by rows of vineyards with white stone walls and gardens bursting with roses. The moment I stepped out of the car, the air thick with lavender and warm sun, my chest tightened. It felt like stepping into a dream I'd never thought I was allowed to have. Inside, a wedding planner guided us through cavernous halls lined with chandeliers and archways. She spoke of seating charts and floral arrangements, but all I could hear was the echo of my father's voice. "No one will care about your little wedding." I looked around at the marble floors, the terrace overlooking endless vines, the ballroom glowing with golden light, and whispered in my mind, he was wrong, so wrong. Later that afternoon, I stood on a platform in a boutique wrapped in layers of ivory lace. The dress hugged me like it had been waiting for me all along. I stared into the mirror, expecting to see the invisible girl from every family gathering, the one who had been shoved into the background. Instead, a woman looked back, strong, luminous, unafraid. Emily and Grace, who had flown in to help, clapped their hands, squealing. "You look like a queen," Grace gasped. Emily wiped her eyes, shaking her head. "Finally, Rachel. Finally, they don't get to hide you." My throat tightened. For once I let the tears fall, not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd finally found. That night, when I got home, my phone buzzed with a message from a distant cousin. "Your mother is devastated. She hasn't received her invitation. Are you sure you want to do this to her?" I stared at the screen, anger curling through me. Do this to her? She had erased me from Victoria's wedding without hesitation. Yet I was the one accused of cruelty for choosing my own peace. Ethan saw my face, plucked the phone gently from my hand, and read the text. His jaw set. "They'll spin it however it suits them. But remember, this is your day. You owe them nothing." His words steadied me, though the hurt still pulsed. I thought of the years I'd spent twisting myself into knots trying to earn their approval. Now they demanded inclusion, not out of love, but for appearances, and I was finally saying no. Days later, the calls started. My father's voice sharp and commanding. "This family needs to be united. Do you know what people are saying? If you have any sense, you'll let us attend. It's bigger than you." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my voice steady. "It's not bigger than me, Dad. It's mine." There was a pause, then his laughter cold, dismissive. "You really think anyone cares? Your sister's wedding was the event of the year. Yours will be a footnote if it's noticed at all." My chest clenched, but I didn't let him hear it. "We'll see," I said, and hung up. That evening, as if the universe had heard me, a call came from a journalist at Tech World magazine. They wanted to do a feature on Ethan's innovations and for the first time introduce the fiancé behind the man. My stomach knotted. I knew what it meant. My story would be out there. My family would no longer be able to pretend I was invisible. When I told Ethan, he looked at me with that steady fire in his eyes. "You don't have to hide anymore, Rachel. Let them see you. Let the world see the truth." I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, my mind tangled between fear and exhilaration. If I stepped into the light, there would be no going back. But maybe that was the point. The next morning, as the city woke outside my window, I picked up my journal and wrote a single line across the page. Justice doesn't come from pleasing them. It comes from living free. Just as the ink dried, my phone vibrated again. A text from my mother. "If you dare to humiliate us, you'll regret it." My hand trembled, but then I set the phone face down. For once I didn't feel fear, I felt fire. I looked at the ring on my finger light, catching it like a spark, and whispered to the empty room, "No. This time, you'll be the ones who regret it." The email arrived just after lunch, buried between financial reports and client updates. I almost missed it until the subject line caught my eye: feature request, Tech World magazine. My pulse quickened as I clicked it open. The words swam before me: "We'd like to profile Ethan Cole and his fiancée for an exclusive cover story." For a moment I just stared, my coffee cooling on the desk. Me, the girl my family had labeled a troublemaker, erased from a wedding, like I was an embarrassment, now invited to step onto the front page with a man the industry called a visionary. I shut my office door, leaned back against it, and let out a shaky breath. That evening, Ethan found me at the kitchen table, the email still open on my laptop. He scanned it quickly, then looked at me with a smile that was all encouragement. "This is it, Rachel. You deserve to be seen." My hands twisted together. "But they'll say I'm using you. They'll spin it. My mother already has half the neighborhood convinced I'm selfish." Ethan reached for me, lifting my chin until I had no choice but to meet his eyes. "Let them. You've been living under their version of you for too long. Now the world gets to see the truth." 2 weeks later, we stood on the stone steps of the Cole mansion in Napa, cameras flashing in every direction. Stylists adjusted my hair, pinned the silk gown at my waist, and positioned me beside Ethan as the photographer barked instructions. The scent of roses drifted in the air, the vineyard stretching green and endless behind us. "Perfect, Rachel," the photographer said, lowering his camera. "You've got the kind of face that tells a story. Don't hide from it." For once, I didn't want to. When the interview came, the journalist asked questions about Ethan's innovations, his company's trajectory, his vision for the future. Then her gaze slid to me. "And you, Rachel, what has it been like to stand beside him through all of this?" I hesitated, but Ethan's hand squeezed mine. My voice steadied. "I know what it's like to be overlooked, dismissed." But Ethan never let me feel small. He saw me, and together we've built something no one can erase. The journalist's eyes softened as she scribbled notes. "That's powerful." By the time the shoot wrapped, I was exhausted but buoyant. For once, I wasn't invisible. But my phone told a different story. Notifications stacked high, dozens of texts, missed calls. When I opened the first, it was from my mother. "What are you doing parading yourself in the press? You're humiliating this family. Come home and stop this madness." I scrolled. Another from my father. "You think you can fool people, but no one will care about you. You'll never have a happy marriage, Rachel. Mark my words." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. The same sentence he'd spat in my face weeks earlier, now resurrected in black and white. My throat tightened, but then I felt Ethan's hand on my back, grounding me. "They'll see soon enough," he said quietly. The issue hit stands the following Monday. Our photo dominated the cover. Ethan sharp in a navy suit, me in an ivory dress, eyes locked on each other beneath the headline, "The Private Fiancé of Tech Visionary Ethan Cole." The internet lit up within hours. Articles dissected my background, speculations swirled, comments flooded in. Some praised me, she's stunning, she looks strong finally. Someone genuine. Others were cruel gold digger, troublemaker in disguise. But I kept scrolling, my heart hammering, because beneath the noise was the truth. I was no longer invisible. By evening, another storm hit. My cousin sent a screenshot of my mother's latest Facebook post. As parents, we can only pray for our daughter Rachel, who has chosen to distance herself from us. We love her, but she insists on creating drama. Still, we forgive. Forgive, the word nearly choked me. They had painted me into a villain so perfectly, now parading as saints to an audience that didn't know better. But this time the comments didn't flow in their favor. Didn't you cut her out of Victoria's wedding? If you loved her, why wasn't she there? The tide was turning. Later that night, curled on the couch with Ethan, I watched the TV replay clips of us at the photo shoot, our smiles frozen on screen. The anchor's voice floated over the footage. Seattle native Rachel Adams, once a quiet figure, is now stepping into the spotlight as the fiancée of billionaire Ethan Cole. The phone buzzed again. I glanced at it. 55 missed calls. Mother, father, Victoria. Their names stacked one after another, relentless. I set the phone face down on the table, my chest rising and falling with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. They can call all they want, I whispered. But I'm not answering. Not this time. Ethan pulled me close, his voice low in my ear. Because now, Rachel, it's your story, not theirs. The diamond on my finger caught the light from the TV, sparkling like a promise, and I let myself believe him. The morning after the magazine dropped, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails, texts, interview, requests, everyone wanted a piece of the story. But buried beneath the flood was a message that made my stomach twist. Rachel, we need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th. Victoria. I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering. My sister, the same one who had smiled as I was erased from her wedding, now wanted to talk. Against every instinct screaming to ignore her, I typed back one word: fine. The cafe was half empty when I walked in. The hiss of espresso machines filled the silence. Victoria sat near the window in a camel coat, a designer bag slouched against her chair. For once, she didn't look polished. Her hair was loose, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She didn't waste time. You've made quite a splash. I slid into the seat across from her, folding my arms. That's one word for it. Her gaze flicked nervously toward the barista before she leaned in. Look, the family's struggling. Dad's been cornered at the club, investors are whispering. And Daniel's startup. She broke off, chewing her lip. It's not good. My chest tightened. Of course. So that's why you asked me here. Not because you suddenly remembered you had a sister. Victoria flinched. Rachel, it's not like that. You don't understand the pressure. You thought cutting me out would make everything easier, I snapped. And now that you're drowning, I'm suddenly useful. She swallowed, hard, eyes glistening. If you could just talk to Ethan. Or his father. One introduction could save us. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. You erased me from your life, from your perfect wedding, and now you want me to clean up your mess. Her voice cracked. I'll tell Mom and Dad to back off. I'll make them apologize. Just please help us. I leaned back, a bitter laugh spilling out. An apology in exchange for a bailout. That's not family, Victoria. That's a business transaction. Her shoulders sagged, the smugness that once defined her face replaced by desperation. But my mind flashed back to that night at their house, her cool words. It was better that way. I would never forget. I stood, slipping on my coat. You wanted a world without me. Congratulations. Live in it. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I walked out, leaving her with her untouched latte and her unraveling empire. Back at my apartment, the missed calls from my parents stacked like a tower of ghosts. My father's voicemail was clipped sharp. Rachel, this has gone far enough. Stop embarrassing us. Let us attend your wedding, and we can restore the family's name. My mother's followed, her tone dripping sweetness. Sweetheart, think carefully. It will make everything easier if you just let us in. Families heal, remember. I pressed delete on each one, my throat tight. Families heal. Did families erase one daughter to celebrate another? Did they laugh while calling her a troublemaker? That evening, Ethan came home to find me pacing the living room. They won't stop, I told him. First Victoria, now my parents. All they see is leverage, not me. He pulled me into his arms. Then say no. You don't owe them anything. I know, I whispered, voice shaking. But part of me still wanted them to want me for me. Ethan tilted my chin, eyes burning steady. Rachel, they never will. But you've built something stronger with me, with the people who chose you. That's what matters. The following weekend, we attended a charity dinner in downtown Seattle. The ballroom buzzed with chatter, crystal glasses clinking. As we entered, cameras flashed, and the announcer's voice carried, "Please welcome Ethan Cole and his fiancée Rachel Adams." I smiled, walking tall beside him. For once the attention didn't suffocate, it felt earned. But halfway through the evening I spotted them, my parents seated at a table across the room, their eyes fixed on me. My mother's smile was strained, my father's jaw tight. Victoria sat between them, pale, her gaze darting nervously. During intermission, they cornered me in the hallway near the restrooms. My father's voice was low but urgent. "Rachel, listen. The press is making us look like monsters. If you don't want to reconcile for love, then at least think of the family's reputation. Let us stand by you at your wedding. That's all we ask." I stared at him, the same man who had once laughed in my face and told me no one would ever marry me. "That's all you ask? You want me to fix your image? Not my life, not my heart, your image." His nostrils flared. "You're being unreasonable." "No," I said, my voice calm and cutting. "I'm finally being clear." My mother touched my arm, her eyes glistening. "Rachel, please. People will forgive if you let us show we're united. You'll regret it if you shut us out." I shook her hand off gently. "I've regretted plenty already, but not anymore." I turned, heels clicking against the marble, leaving them standing stunned in the corridor. When I returned to the ballroom, Ethan was waiting. He read the storm in my face without asking, and simply took my hand. As the music swelled, he whispered, "You did it. You didn't flinch." I pressed closer to him, my chest rising steady for the first time in days. The truth was undeniable. They needed me now more than I ever needed them. Later that night back home, I set my phone on the table and watched as it lit up again and again with their desperate calls. I didn't answer. Instead, I whispered to the darkened window, 30 years of being their afterthought, and only 3 weeks to turn the tables. This is just the beginning. The city glowed outside, alive with possibilities, and for once I felt alive with it. The night of the Seattle Tech Gala arrived with a chill that carried across the waterfront. Spotlights swept the sky above the glass convention center, and luxury cars pulled up one after another, spilling out the city's most polished elite. Ethan's hand rested on mine as our driver opened the door. The sound of cameras clicking was immediate, a flurry of flashbulbs sparking against the cold air. "Mr. Cole, Miss Adams, this way," a photographer called, her voice swallowed by the rising hum. I stepped onto the carpet, my midnight blue gown catching the light. My heels clicked against the stone, each step deliberate. Ethan leaned close, whispering, "You've got this." I nodded, though my pulse thundered. Inside, the ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, tables dressed in ivory linens and trimmed with gold. The air smelled of champagne and roses. Murmurs followed us as we made our way toward the front, where the announcer's voice rose. "Please welcome our special guest, Ethan Cole, and his fiancée Rachel Adams." Applause swept the room. For once, the eyes on me didn't feel dismissive. They felt attentive, curious, maybe even admiring. But then I saw them. At a table near the stage sat my parents, their posture rigid, faces tight with forced composure. And beside them, Victoria in a pale silk dress, lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The sight punched the breath from me. I forced myself to look ahead to sit at the table assigned to Ethan and me, but their presence burned against my skin. Halfway through the evening, as Ethan rose to speak about innovation and philanthropy, my mother approached me. She carried a champagne flute, her smile bright enough to blind. Cameras pivoted. "Rachel," she cooed, grasping my hand, "darling, how wonderful to see you." The grip was tight, her knuckles pale. I leaned in, voice low and sharp. "Don't. Not here." She tilted her head, eyes glittering. "You'll ruin everything if you pull away. Smile for the cameras." My chest tightened, but I yanked my hand free. "You already ruined everything," I said, just loud enough for her to hear. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but before she could reply, my father materialized. His voice was a hiss. "You're making us look like fools. Do you want the world to think you've abandoned your family?" I looked him dead in the eye, my voice steady. "I didn't abandon anyone. You abandoned me long before this." Before either of them could answer, a reporter appeared, notebook in hand. "Excuse me, Rachel, just one question. Is it true your parents won't be attending your wedding?" The lights seemed to grow hotter. Conversations quieted around us. My mother's hand twitched toward mine again, but I stepped forward. "My wedding is about love and support. Only those who truly wish us happiness will be there." A murmur swept the room. A few people even clapped softly. My father's face darkened crimson, my mother's smile quivered like glass about to crack. Victoria suddenly rose from their table, gliding toward us, her dress whispering over the floor. "Excuse me," she said sweetly, addressing the crowd. "My sister can be sensitive, but our family loves her. We always have." Something inside me snapped. "Love," I said, my voice ringing sharper than I intended. "Is that what you call erasing me from your wedding?" Smiling while the whole family toasted and pretended I didn't exist. Gasps fluttered across the ballroom. Victoria's smile faltered, then returned in brittle form. "You don't understand." "No," I cut in. "I understand perfectly. You wanted a perfect picture without me. Well, now the picture has changed." The MC scrambled to shift attention back to the program, but the whispers spread like wildfire. Phones lifted, capturing every strained smile, every cutting word. My parents retreated toward their table, faces stiff, while Victoria stood, frozen, eyes wide, before turning sharply on her heel. When Ethan returned to my side, applause still echoing faintly from his speech, he read my expression instantly. He slipped an arm around my waist and whispered, "You stood your ground." We left the gala early, sliding into the car as the crowd's buzz followed us. My phone lit up with notifications before we even reached the freeway. Headlines already spun online. Adams family rift erupts at tech gala, bride to be Rachel Adams speaks out. I leaned back against the seat, breath ragged, heart hammering. For years I had swallowed words, held my tongue, kept peace at the expense of myself. But tonight I had said what needed to be said out loud in front of the world. Ethan squeezed my hand. "They never expected you to rise. That's why they're panicking." I turned to the window, Seattle's lights shimmering against the bay. My reflection stared back, eyes sharp, no longer haunted. "They tried to erase me," I whispered, voice steady now. "But now the world sees me, and I'm not disappearing again." News of the gala spread faster than I could have imagined. By the time the sun rose the next morning, headlines flooded every feed. Troublemaker, bride confronts family at Seattle gala. Rachel Adams breaks silence on estrangement. My photo, chin lifted, eyes blazing, was plastered across news sites that had never once said my name before. But it wasn't just me under scrutiny. My father's company was dragged into the spotlight. Commentators questioned his leadership, murmured about hypocrisy. "If he can't manage his own family," one columnist wrote, "how can he manage multi-million-dollar partnerships?" By midday, an investor had pulled out, citing instability of reputation. At the office, whispers followed me, but this time they weren't pitying. One coworker leaned over as I poured coffee. "You know, Rachel, I think you were brave. A lot of us saw that clip." She gave me a nod that felt heavier than applause. "Respect." The thing I'd chased all my life was finally mine without them granting it. That evening I sat on my balcony, Seattle's skyline glowing like fireflies across the water, when my phone rang. Victoria. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Her voice cracked the moment I answered. Rachel, please. We need to meet. It's bad. Everything's falling apart. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The cafe was dim, filled with the smell of burnt beans and old wood. Victoria sat in the corner, pale under the yellow light, her hands clenched around a paper cup she hadn't touched. When she looked up, her eyes were swollen, her eyeliner smudged. Thank you for coming, she whispered. I slid into the chair opposite, folding my arms. Say what you need to say. Her lips trembled. Daniel's startup, it's collapsing. Investors are backing out. We're drowning in debt. If you could talk to Ethan or his father, just one introduction, one call. The audacity made me laugh. Sharp, humorless. So, now I'm useful. After you cut me out of your wedding, after you let them call me a problem for 30 years. Now you need me. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know what to do. I just wanted things perfect. But I swear if you help us, she swallowed. I'll convince Mom and Dad to change, to finally give you what you deserve. I leaned forward, my voice low, every word edged. You don't have the power to give me what I deserve. You never did, and you'll never barter my existence like a bargaining chip again. Her face crumpled. For a moment I thought I might feel pity, but all I felt was release. I stood slipping on my coat. You chose your picture-perfect world without me. Live in it. She reached out as if to stop me, but I walked away, the sound of her muffled sobs following me out into the night. When I returned home, the storm hadn't abated. 2 voicemails waited, my father's voice clipped, commanding, Rachel, this circus has gone far enough. Let us attend your wedding. We can restore the family's name. The second, my mother's, saccharine, sweet darling, think carefully. Families can heal if you let them. Don't throw this chance away. I pressed delete on both, my pulse steady. Later, while Ethan and I ate takeout on the couch, I told him everything. He listened quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he set down his fork and said simply, They've mistaken you for leverage. But you're not leverage, Rachel. You're free. The words sank deep, soothing some part of me still raw. 2 nights later, the storm came to my doorstep. A knock rattled the door, sharp and insistent. I opened it to find my parents standing there, coats pulled tight against the cold faces drawn. My father's tone was measured, but his eyes burned. Rachel, enough. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. Talk. He glanced at my mother before continuing. The press is destroying us. If you allow us to be present at your wedding publicly, visibly, we can all walk out of this with dignity. I almost laughed. Dignity. That was what he wanted to salvage. Not me. Not the 30 years of silence and scorn. His dignity. You're not asking to be part of my wedding, I said, voice calm. You're asking me to fix your reputation. My mother stepped forward, eyes glistening, voice trembling in her well-rehearsed way. Rachel, please, we love you. People will forgive, but only if you let us stand by you. Don't let pride ruin what's left. I shook my head. Love doesn't erase someone. Love doesn't brand them a troublemaker. Love doesn't sell them out for appearances. My father's voice hardened. You're making a mistake. I straightened shoulders, squaring. No. For the first time, I'm not. Their faces froze, brittle and pale. For once I wasn't the one begging. I closed the door. Inside, the apartment was quiet except for the thud of my heart. I pressed my palms against the wood, breathing deeply. Years of bending, of breaking myself to fit their version of me ended in that moment. When I turned, Ethan was standing there, steady as ever. He pulled me into his arms. You did it, he murmured. You finally drew the line. I buried my face in his shoulder, tears spilling, but they weren't the old tears of despair. They were the tears of someone finally free. Later, alone by the window, I stared out at the city lights flickering against the dark sky. My phone buzzed again with their names, but I didn't move. I only whispered to my reflection. They once said I'd never have a happy marriage. Soon the whole world will see just how wrong they were. The sun dipped low over Napa Valley, painting the vineyards in a golden haze as guests began arriving at the Cole estate. Rows of black cars wound up the hill, headlights flickering like fireflies, spilling out men in tuxedos and women in gowns that shimmered under the last streaks of daylight. The air smelled of roses and champagne, carried on a soft California breeze. From behind the carved oak doors of the mansion, I pressed my hands against the silk of my dress to steady them. The lace bodice hugged me like armor, the long ivory train pooling across the polished marble floor. In the mirror, a woman stared back at me who barely resembled the shadow that had been told she'd never marry, never belong. "Ready?" Ethan asked, stepping into the room, his navy suit sharp against the candlelight. His eyes softened when he saw me. I nodded, though my throat was tight. More than ready. When the doors opened, a hush fell over the crowd. Cameras flashed instantly, the glow of chandeliers raining down light across the terrace. Grandma June sat in the front row, her hands clasped tight over her chest, tears already slipping down her cheeks. Aunt Margaret leaned over to pat her shoulder, smiling proudly. Emily and Grace waved discreetly from behind their phones, their joy uncontained. I stepped forward, each stride steady, my heart drumming in rhythm with the music. For once, every eye on me wasn't judging or dismissing, they were honoring. At the altar, Ethan reached for my hands, his smile grounding me like it always had. His voice carried firm and unwavering. "I choose you, Rachel. Not for appearances, not for convenience, but because you are my home." The tears blurred my vision, but my voice came strong. I was told I'd never have a happy marriage, that no one would want me. But standing here with you, I know that was a lie. You are my proof. The officiant's words blurred in the rush of applause that erupted when we were pronounced husband and wife. Ethan kissed me long and certain, and the sound of clapping roared through the hall. Fireworks crackled outside, lighting up the vineyard sky in bursts of silver and gold. But beyond the gates, unseen by most, I knew they were there. My parents and Victoria had arrived, dressed in their finery, demanding to be let in. Security turned them away, and they were left standing in the dusk, forced to watch from a distance as our ceremony streamed live on screens inside. My mother's voice, sharp with desperation, carried faintly across the gravel drive. "That should have been us." My father's jaw clenched, face flushed. "She's humiliating us on purpose." But there was no stopping it. For the first time in my life, the power was mine. Inside, the celebration swelled. The ballroom glowed under chandeliers, long tables lined with ivory cloths, garlands of greenery, and glasses sparkling with champagne. Music rose as the first dance began. Ethan led me to the center, the crowd circling close. His hand at my waist, his gaze locked on mine, I moved with a lightness I'd never known. Around us, friends clapped to the beat, Aunt Margaret beaming, Grandma June dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. As the final note lingered, the applause shook the room. Then the host stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement tonight." The projector lit up, flashing across the far wall. A glossy magazine cover appeared hot off the press, Forbes Lifestyle. "The Troublemaker Who Won Love and Power." The cover showed Ethan and me hand in hand beneath the vineyard's archway, smiles steady, the diamond on my finger gleaming under sunlight. Gasps rippled across the room, followed by cheers. I froze, staring at the image. Me. On the cover of a magazine that once would never have written my name, now defining me, not as my family's failure, but as a woman who had risen despite them. Phones buzzed across the ballroom as guests texted, tweeted, posted. Online, the news spread in waves. The story of the forgotten daughter, turned bride of a billionaire, lit the feeds like wildfire. And then my phone buzzed. Again. And again. I pulled it from my clutch, the screen lighting up so fast I could barely read the names. My father. My mother. Victoria. 55 missed calls stacked one after another, notifications pouring in like floodwater. I stared at the glowing screen, my reflection faint in the glass, and for once I didn't feel the familiar ache of being left out. I felt free. I set the phone down on the linen tablecloth, untouched, and turned back toward Ethan. His hand found mine warm and steady. "They can scream all they want," he murmured in my ear. "But tonight, this is ours." I nodded, the weight of years lifting as I let the music swell around me. The chandelier light shimmered across my dress, across his smile, across the faces of those who had chosen me, not out of obligation, but out of love. I leaned into Ethan as the room erupted again in laughter and music, the sounds of joy ringing louder than every cruel word I'd ever heard. For the first time I felt what my father had sworn I never would. I felt happy, and I knew it would last. The morning after the wedding, the world looked different. Sunlight spilled through the windows of the Cole estate, glinting across champagne glasses left behind on banquet tables, the faint scent of roses and candle wax still clinging to the air. My dress hung carefully in the corner of our suite, the train draped like a banner of victory. I padded barefoot to the balcony, phone in hand, and saw what I already suspected: the cover story had exploded. From Troublemaker to Tech Billionaire's Bride. The headlines screamed from every major outlet. Our photo on the vineyard steps had been reposted thousands of times, dissected, praised, gossiped over. Strangers I'd never met called me resilient, strong, inspiring. For once my name wasn't a shadow of Victoria's. It was mine alone. But the praise wasn't universal. As I scrolled, I found the other voices, ones I knew all too well. My father's clipped text: "You've humiliated this family. Answer the phone." My mother's desperate messages: "How dare you shut us out? You've embarrassed us in front of the entire community." Victoria's voicemail, tearful but still sharp at the edges: "You didn't have to do this to us." I set the phone down on the balcony, railing the vineyard stretching endless and serene before me. They still didn't understand. None of this was about them. Later that day, the fallout became clearer. Charles Adams's company was trending for all the wrong reasons. Reporters circled like vultures, questioning whether the family scandal reflected on his leadership. A board member had resigned. A long-time client had pulled out of a contract. For a man who cared more about his reputation than his daughter, this was the sharpest wound. Helen fared no better. Her carefully curated image as a gracious wife and church leader cracked under scrutiny. Screenshots of her Facebook posts, the ones calling me selfish and dramatic, began circulating alongside photos of me on the magazine cover. The comments beneath were merciless. Some mother, she erased her own daughter. Now she wants sympathy. And Victoria, her shiny new marriage, had already lost its sheen. Daniel's startup collapsed under the weight of unpaid debt, investors pointing to family instability as one more reason to bail. Their mansion, bought on promises of success, was now up for sale. I watched all this unfold, not with glee but with a strange, heavy calm. Karma had done what I never could. By evening my phone rang again. This time it was a video call. Against every instinct I answered. Their faces appeared, all three of them together. My mother's eyes were red, my father's jaw tight, Victoria pale and drawn. For a fleeting moment I saw the family portrait we might have been if things had ever been different. But then my father spoke. "Rachel," he said, stiffly, "enough is enough. This feud is destroying us. If you bring us back into the fold, if you let us appear at your side, we can salvage what's left." I laughed, softly shaking my head. There it is. Not a word about love. Just reputation. Just salvaging. My mother leaned forward, her voice trembling. "We love you, sweetheart. People can forgive, but only if you let us stand beside you. Don't let pride ruin what's left of this family." I felt Ethan step behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder, silent but steady. I looked into the camera, meeting their eyes one by one. "You didn't just miss a wedding, you missed years of chances. Every spelling bee, every scholarship, every promotion. You called me names, cut me out, branded me a problem. And now that you've lost control, you expect me to hand it back. No, I'm done. Victoria's lips trembled. Rachel, please. No, I said firmly. You chose your side when you stood in that ballroom without me. Now, I'm choosing mine. I ended the call. Their faces blinked out, replaced by the quiet reflection of my own. For a long moment I just sat there, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. Then Ethan pulled me into his arms. You did it, he whispered. You finally set yourself free. I buried my face against his chest, the tears spilling. But they weren't the old tears of invisibility. They were new tears of release. Later that night I called Grandma June. She picked up on the first ring, her voice warm even through static. Oh, sweetheart, I saw the photos. You looked radiant. I swallowed my throat tight. Grandma, they called. They wanted me to let them back in. She sighed, the kind of sigh that carried decades of wisdom. Family is who shows up, Rachel, not who demands a place when it suits them. You've found yours now. Don't forget that. I closed my eyes, letting her words soak through me. She was right. My family wasn't the one that had tried to erase me. It was the one that stood beside me without condition. Ethan, Grandma, Margaret, my cousins, my friends. When I hung up, I walked out to the balcony again. The night sky stretched, wide stars winking like promises overhead. Below, the vines rustled softly, steady and rooted, just like I finally felt. My father once said I'd never have a happy marriage. Tonight, as I slipped my hand into Ethan's and felt the ring glint under the starlight, I knew he'd been wrong all along. I had not only a marriage but a life of my own choosing. And that was something they could never take back. 3 weeks after the wedding, the Cole estate was quiet again, its gardens no longer buzzing with photographers or guests, but alive with the softer sound of birdsong and rustling leaves. I sat on the porch swing with a cup of tea, the morning air crisp, watching sunlight spill across the vineyards. The world had shifted since that day, yet here, wrapped in silence, I felt something I had chased for years: peace. Inside, Ethan's laughter drifted faintly from the kitchen as he argued playfully with Aunt Margaret about whose pie recipe deserved the center spot at the next family dinner. Emily and Grace sprawled on the sofa with fabric samples for holiday decorations, chattering excitedly. Grandma June sat in the armchair nearest the fire, her shawl draped across her shoulders, her smile soft as she looked around the room. For once, every face that surrounded me was one that wanted me there. I stepped back inside, setting my cup down. "What's all this?" I asked, amused. Emily grinned. "We're planning the first official Adams Cole Thanksgiving minus the toxic branch of the tree." Grace giggled. "We might even outdo Victoria's wedding decor. No silk, just fairy lights and pie." Their laughter filled the room and I let it wash over me. For years, gatherings had been minefields where I waited for the next cutting remark, the next dismissal. Now the air was light, genuine. Later, when the cousins slipped out and Margaret bundled herself into her coat, I lingered with Grandma June by the fire. She reached for my hand, her fingers warm and papery. "Sweetheart, I don't think I've ever seen you shine like this." Tears stung my eyes. I didn't think it was possible. For so long I thought family meant the ones who hurt me. Her grip tightened. Family is who shows up. And look at you now, surrounded by people who see you, who choose you. Don't ever doubt that again. That night, Ethan and I hosted a small dinner with a few close friends. Candles flickered across the table, the scent of roasted chicken and rosemary filling the air. As the plates cleared, Ethan rose, glass in hand. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice firm but filled with warmth. His gaze found mine across the table. "To Rachel. She has shown me, and I think all of us, that strength isn't about shouting the loudest or bending yourself to fit someone else's mold. It's about standing up even when the people closest to you try to push you down. She's not just my wife. She's my partner, my equal, my proof that love wins over cruelty." The room erupted in applause. My cheeks burned, but my heart swelled. For the first time, words about me weren't barbed or dismissive. They were proud, reverent. After the dinner, I slipped out onto the balcony. The night air was cool, scented faintly with lavender. I leaned against the railing, letting the quiet settle. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message from Victoria. If I truly change, will you give me a chance? Someday. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart heavy but steady. I didn't reply. Forgiveness maybe one day. But not today. Not while the wound was still raw. Tonight wasn't about them. It was about the life I was building without their approval. Ethan joined me, sliding an arm around my waist. What's on your mind? I showed him the message, then set the phone face down on the railing. I don't need to answer. Not now. He kissed my temple, murmuring, Exactly. This is our story, not theirs. The stars glimmered overhead, endless and unbothered by the chaos below. I thought of all the years my father's words haunted me. You'll never have a happy marriage. Tonight, with Ethan's arm around me, and laughter from our friends echoing inside, I knew the curse had been broken long before. When I went to bed, I opened my journal and wrote, Family is not blood. Family is love, freely given, respect earned, and belonging chosen. To those listening now, I want to say this. If you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever been cast out or silenced by those who should have cherished, you remember, you have the right to choose who deserves your heart. You are not what they call you. You are what you build, what you love, what you fight for. This is my story, but I know so many of you have your own. Share it with me. I want to hear how you found your strength, how you turned pain into power. Leave your words in the comments so others know they're not alone. And if this journey touched, you don't forget to like and subscribe. Together we can keep telling stories that remind us all. Justice belongs to those who choose it, and family belongs to those who show up.